I will never forget the terror that I felt the first time I was able to go trick-or-treating alone when I was younger. A friend and I, who lived in our neighborhood, had been wanting this moment forever, to be able to dress up on Halloween, our favorite time of the year, and be able to go trick-or-treating alone, without our parents. And in 2006, it was the first year we were allowed to do so. I was so excited, getting ready in my pirate costume. The thought of all the candy we were going to get and how much fun we were going to have just filled me with energy. And I hadn't even had a piece of candy at this point. I remember our parents giving us the talk, trick or treat on the street and don't stray too far. We of course said yes, but we really weren't paying too much attention as we were just too excited at the time. And with our goodbye at the door, we headed down the path and into the chilling Halloween night. The streets were alive with others trick-or-treating. The houses decorated to the max, with carved jack-o'-lanterns outside all of the houses. The spirit of Halloween was in full swing, and we loved it. As we went from house to house, we were greeted by willing participants that complimented our costumes and seemed to enjoy the night just as much as we did. It didn't take us very long to complete the street, and as mentioned, we weren't really paying much attention to what we were told earlier. So we decided to stray from our street and on to the next. We still had time before we had to be back and still had plenty of room for more candy. As the street began to quiet down, we seemed to be heading in the opposite direction to all the other dressed up ghosts and ghouls. We made our way up one drive and again was met with a nice couple who gave us a load of chocolate. It was then, as we made our way back down the drive and onto the street, heading to the next house, we heard the sound of a car engine slowly pulling up behind us. As we turned, we saw an old gray Ford trailing the curb next to us as the windows slowly came down. A bearded man looked out the window, smiling at us. He said,
"Wow, what great costumes you two have. Want to see mine?"
We didn't reply as we just kept walking. The car continued to stroll next to us. As we looked back, the man now had on a plastic clown mask.
"Hey, you like my mask?"
He asked us, and we nodded in approval.
"Yeah, anyway, my daughter and her friend have been trick-or-treating tonight. They came back with far too much candy for the two of them, so I'm just offering it to people. You guys want some?"
As he asked us this question, I thought that it was an odd thing to do, and I could see no sign of his daughter or anyone else for that matter. My friend, however, spoke for the both of us when he gladly accepted and said that we would love some candy.
"Great. Well, hey, the bags are on the back seat. Just open it up and take what you want."
As my friend began to move towards the back door, I pulled his arm to stop him momentarily. "Hey, so where's your daughter and her friend?" The clown mask stared back at me as they chuckled.
"Oh, they're at home now."
Again, I got an uncomfortable feeling in my stomach as I tried to stop my friend from moving closer to the car, but he had already reached the back door. As his hand hovered over the handle, he stopped, slowly backing up as he said, "Actually, I think we're okay. We have enough candy." As he turned, walking back to me, I could see the change of look on his face from excitement to fear.
"What? You can never have enough candy,"
the man said with a more impatient tone in his voice now. "But you just said that your daughter and her friend got too much candy." As I said this, silence fell, as all we could see was the glaring stare of the man's eyes through the clown mask as he stared angrily at us.
"I'm offering you free candy. Now open the fucking door and take some. What's wrong with you?"
he said impatiently. Our hearts began to race as we both said again, "No thank you," and hurriedly walked up the road, the car slowly following behind. I asked my friend why he stopped at the door, and what he said next scared the crap out of me. He said when he went to open the door, he saw the figure of another person in a clown mask lying down in the back seat staring back at him. I felt sick. I knew what this was. As I looked back at the car trailing us, I told my friend to run to the next house and we would knock and ask for help. As we went up the steps and knocked on the door, A woman answered and we told her exactly what had happened and pointed over to the car. As she looked up, the car picked up speed and drove off. That was the end of our trick-or-treating that night. After that, we decided to head back, neither of us feeling safe or in the mood to continue. That other person was clearly hiding, waiting to grab one of us into the car. We didn't want to tell our parents of the encounter, as we knew they would never let us trick-or-treat alone again, so we just went back to mine, saying we had a good time and continued with our sleepover we were having that night. Later that night, we were staying up late, feeling a lot calmer and over the whole ordeal from earlier in the evening. As we sat in front of the TV watching a cheesy horror film, I paused the TV as I thought I could hear something. As we listened in silence, I could hear movement outside the front window. My friend pointed as he said he was sure he saw a shadow move past. As we sat there, I stood up, approaching the window. The blind was shut, so I went to peek through it. It was then I froze, as the sound of somebody trying to wedge open the window sent a shiver down my spine. It stopped, as it was clearly locked, but it was then we both saw the shadow of a person stand up and move around the side of the house, our hearts pounding, not knowing who this was outside my house so late at night. I had to see. I approached the blind to peek through, thinking the person was gone. It was as I looked, though, I fell back screaming, as my eyes had come face to face with the same clown mask from the car earlier that night standing in the distance. I heard my parents shout from their bedroom upstairs as we both ran toward the stairs. We told my dad about the man outside the window, and in a rage, he ran to the door just in time to open it and see the gray Ford speed off out of sight. The police were called and we had to give statements and descriptions of who we saw in their car. Those predators must have followed us back to my house that night and waited until they thought everyone was asleep to gain access. It sickens me to this day that we came so close to child abduction and that there really are sick freaks like that out there. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. They're not just out there at Halloween, so please, if you take anything from my story, be safe and cautious out there, and don't let your young ones trick or treat from too young of an age.
Halloween was a time of year I looked forward to. Where I'm from, it isn't celebrated as much as it is in other parts of the world, but being a fan of horror and the spooky season, I enjoyed it, and I still do in some ways. Just not as much as I used to, because of what happened to me a few years back on Halloween 2019. What happened still freaks me out today. I'm from a quiet town, and although we didn't usually get many trick-or-treaters in the area, I was always prepared and brought candy and chocolates for the odd few that we did get that knocked on the door. I like to acknowledge the people that did make the effort to celebrate the occasion and dress up in cool costumes for the night, as it used to be one of my favorite holidays throughout the year. So, a few nights before, I stocked up and got supplies to leave in a bowl ready for the night. It was soon Halloween, and that night, as I had no plans on going out myself, I decided to chill out, get a few beers and watch a few of my favorite horror movies back to back. I remember being halfway through Hellraiser when the doorbell rang. It was 9 PM, and it was the first set of trick-or-treaters I'd gotten that night. I made my way to the door and grabbed the bowl of candy. As I opened the door, I was greeted by a mini Michael Myers and an awesome-looking scarecrow. I complimented their costumes and gave them both some candy, and then waved them goodbye as they made their way back down the drive and through the gate. I was soon back to the film, enjoying it as I hadn't seen it in so long. After that had finished, I decided to put on a more modern horror film with the first Conjuring. It was nearing 11 PM when I was settled watching the film, and pretty certain I wouldn't be getting any more trick-or-treaters at that time of night. I paused the film, headed to grab myself another drink and lock up, but as I was in the kitchen, 3 loud knocks echoed down the hallway from the front door. I looked at the time and thought surely it couldn't be more trick-or-treaters. As I made my way to the door, I bypassed the bowl of candy straight to the door. As I opened it, I was met with a tall, hooded figure standing in my doorway, wearing a white, faceless mask, just two dark, sunken holes where their eyes sat. I stood there for a second in silence, thinking to myself, this didn't even look like a kid. Maybe a late teen under the mask at a push, but this person was definitely no kid. The silence was soon broken, as a deep, quiet voice came from behind the mask, as they slowly said, "Trick or treat," in an emotionless way. Still processing the person that stood at my door, I soon tried to lighten the mood as I said, "A little late for trick or treating, aren't you?" throwing in a few laughs, trying to lighten the moment as I reached for the bowl of candy. As I turned back, I held out the bowl, offering the guy some candy. But instead of taking some candy, the guy just stood there, motionless, staring at me. I began to feel slightly uneasy as I said, "Here, take some candy and leave." Again, the guy just stood there, staring at me for what felt like forever. I just about had enough, and not to mention freaked by this stranger. I pulled the bowl back as I said, "Okay, the prank's over now. You can leave or I'll call the police." This didn't seem to faze them at all, as the guy again continued to stare at me. As I was about to shout, the guy slowly turned around and walked back off down the drive into the night. Freaked by the whole encounter, I shut the door, locking it behind me, looking outside one more time, making sure they were actually gone. I headed back to the kitchen to grab my drink and finish watching the movie, albeit slightly more creeped out now watching a horror movie and being alone. An hour later, and the movie was nearing the end, I felt myself drifting in and out of sleep, trying to stay awake and watch it. As I was about to give in and sleep, I was soon awake, shooting up to the sound of 3 loud knocks banging on the front door. Startled, my heart now racing, I sat up, staring at the front door. It had gone midnight, and I knew this was no trick-or-treater. I raced over to the door and looked through the peephole. There was no one in sight. I opened the door slowly to get a better view. There was no one there. The drive was empty, but my gut knew and was telling me it was the same guy from an hour prior. I slammed the door shut, locking it again. Freaked out, I made sure all the windows were shut and turned off the TV, getting ready to head upstairs. I grabbed my phone and headed to my room, having had enough of Halloween and horrors for one night. I looked out my bedroom window to get a better view and see if I could see anything outside, but no one was there. I thought maybe whoever that was had finally had enough of pranking me and ran off. I locked my bedroom door and lay on my bed, playing on my phone for a bit as I was too freaked to sleep. After browsing Insta for a while, I began to drift off, and before I knew it, I must have been asleep as what happened next scared the shit out of me. The sound of glass shattering crashed through the house, waking me instantly as adrenaline surged through my body. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find as being a weapon, which ended up being a dumbbell. I stood behind my bedroom door, trying to listen out for any noise or signs of movement downstairs, but there was just silence. I slowly opened my bedroom door, and instantly felt the cold air hit me. Heart pumping, I walked to the top of the stairs looking down, listening for any signs of movement. Slowly making my way down the stairs, I didn't know if I was brave or stupid, but I had to know what had smashed. I reached the bottom, and the house seemed empty. As I turned the corner, I saw the shattered glass of my kitchen back door, which sent shivers down my spine. A brick lay on the floor as I slowly moved in closer. It wasn't until I reached the kitchen door that I could then hear the sound of static coming from my front room, as the door was right next to the kitchen entrance. I slowly pushed open the door to the front room. As it opened, the sound of static grew as the light from my TV lit up the room. It was then, when I saw it, I froze to the spot. Lying on my coffee table in front of the TV was the faceless mask, those dark, sunken black eye holes staring back at me. My heart raced as I looked around the room as I clenched a weight in my hand. The room was empty. Moving closer to the mask, I could see a piece of paper next to the mask, and upon closer inspection it read, "Trick or treat." Fear surging through my body, I made a run to my front door, bursting onto my drive as I called the police. Turning back and looking into my house, fearing someone would follow me out, but no one did. I explained everything to the police, not knowing and fearing that whoever it was still in the house. The operator told me to stay on the line and the officers would be with me shortly. I walked and stood out on my quiet street that night, too afraid to stand at my house. The police arrived pretty soon after I'd called them, and with me in tow, they searched my house, finding no one. Upon leaving, they took the brick, the mask and the note, hoping to gain some evidence as to who it was that broke into my house. I didn't sleep at all that night, and to be honest, many nights after. Nothing ever came back from the police. They were never able to apprehend a suspect. I don't have any idea who it was that came to my door that night, behind that mask, but whoever it was, played one fucked up Halloween prank on me, if that's even what it was. Ever since then, I've never stayed alone on Halloween. You get some freaks out there on Halloween, but the fear of not knowing who it was being the worst. I hope I never come across them again. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed these terrifying encounters. Comment and let us know what you would have done in these situations, and drop a like and share. It really helps the channel out. If you're enjoying the horror and haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We have plenty more terrifying content on the way that we look forward to bringing you. So, until next time, remember, fear lies within.